Well, good morning everyone. So I thought that I would finally do a refrigeration video, and it's to do with this air source heat pump which I made a few years ago, which used to heat the hot tub that we once had. Now I'd like to use this for creating hot water for the house, so it's not much use to me in its current form. And there's a few issues with it in its current form, and this is that the outlet from the expansion valve goes at a right angle like this and goes all the way into the evaporator through an 8mm piece of copper tubing. So ideally the expansion valve should be right there rather than so far away from it. And then here's the condenser, which is the plate heat exchanger. We've got the refrigerant, which has to come out there, go, and then go all the way up. So that's not really ideal either. So I'm going to just take the whole thing to bits and rearrange it so it all fits flat on this board, because it's all going to be permanently fixed inside a shed anyway, so we don't need it on this wheeled platform anymore. So I'll get on with that. The only issue is though, after I do this, it's probably going to be slightly, it might be slightly heavier, I don't know. Depends how much the steel frame weighs, but anyway, that's not going to be needed. So first thing I need to do is recover all the gas from it, and luckily I've got all my equipment there to do that, so I'll get on with that just now. And so yeah, it's got R290 in it, so it's flammable, so I'm going to open both doors while I do this, just in case there's any leaks, just so any gas can dissipate quickly. Okay, so when I'm vacuuming down a system, recovering all the gas from it, I just open both of these fully. Now I just loosen this connection here, and then just purge it through. So the low side of this compressor, which I'm using as the recovery system, is actually under vacuum just now because this is closed, so I just let it purge through just a little bit, because we don't want any air going back in here, because that's just going to spoil the refrigerant. So just letting a little bit through, not very much. So that should be that purged now, so you'll probably be able to see it maybe coming out, just coming out very, very slowly. So put the spark in here. I just purge it a wee bit from there, purge it again. And open this up and let it flow out. Not at full speed, got to give it a chance. So I'm putting it in through the liquid side, and that's mainly so that it's just bubbling through the liquid in the tank so that it can condense quicker. I think my theory is it would prevent the tank from getting as hot, because it's condensing into the refrigerant rather than onto the walls of the tank or the gas space at the top. So I'm just going to let it get down to like maybe 1 or 2 psi, and then I'll just take the lines off and then cut them, and then that'll be it. And I should be able to just rearrange everything on this piece of wood and then fill it with gas again, or at least that's the plan. So yeah, we're just monitoring everything just to make sure that nothing's heating up. That's it running full speed now. So one thing you may notice that if you're removing the gas from a system and you think it's done, then you shut it off, you'll see the pressure rising again, and that's just as the refrigerant boils off inside there. So you have to keep doing it a few times. Just make sure it's at like maybe 1 or 2 psi, and then you can just maybe disconnect that and just run it out a window just to let the last small bit of refrigerant escape. So the last thing to contend with is this here will be full of liquid refrigerant, this line coming out, the vacuum pump recovery unit thingy. So switch this off all the way, and then just open it very gently, and I just let it all escape very slowly, let the liquid in that line boil off. Probably isn't very much in it actually. Sometimes there can be, you can get quite a fright when it all comes out, but if you're careful it shouldn't be a problem. So yeah, that's it. There's now not very much pressure in that at all, so I'm just going to release the last of it out the window, I think, and then that'll be it. And it is R290, which is just propane, so you're allowed to release this gas into the atmosphere. Well, we're getting there. I'd like to comment on using solder rather than brazing for the joints. A lot of people complain that I do this, but here's the inside of one of my joints, and as you can see, it's actually really nice and clean inside if you purge properly. And I used carbon dioxide when I was soldering, and with these soldered joints, I use lead-free solder. It's a bit stronger, and I've never had one of these burst or fail. Like I've had them leak once or twice, and that's because I didn't solder them properly. But if you take your time and use as little flux as possible, these work really well for this. Another thing is I've actually got an air tank which is designed to hold 2000 psi, and the gauge inside it, the little coil of tube inside the gauge that's used to read the pressure, that's actually soldered rather than brazed into the connection that goes to the tank, and that's designed to withstand 2000 psi. So these connections here, there'll be at most 300 psi going through them, so it works perfectly well. And I would use brazing, but unfortunately brazing rods, they're very difficult to find, and they're extremely expensive as well for some odd reason. So plus you've got you need the oxygen, you need the propane or acetylene as well, and it's just much more hassle than it's worth. Of course, if I was doing this commercially, professionally, I would get all the proper equipment, but for DIY hobby projects, I just don't think it's worth going to all the expense of messing about with oxygen and acetylene and buying brazing rods and the dry nitrogen for purging as well. It's just CO2 and soft solder. Soft lead-free solder works perfectly well. So here's how things are progressing. The expansion valve is now no longer away over there with a rather restrictive piece of tubing going to it. I think I've got it lying around somewhere, but this was the original piece of tube which was going into the evaporator, but now I've made it much larger. This tube here, that's the equalizer for the expansion valve, so that goes down inside this manifold here a bit, and it's just in there somewhere. It's just a tube that goes down, and the sensing bulb is going to go here. I'll secure it to there, so this is the return back to the compressor, and that there is just an 8mm microbore central heating manifold. I got off those central heating systems, so I just cleaned it up really nicely and then soldered it in. So got a low side service port, the 2 outlets from the evaporator, and the external equalizer going into that. So I think the whole unit is going to perform much better. after this, in theory, but now I've just got to hook the rest of it up. And this is the original low side service port. I'm just going to close that up and do away with it because it's just really no longer needed, so that can go away. That's pretty much it. It's looking a lot better now. Well, here's where we're up to. I've just decided to just get bashing on with it and get it all put together. So it's under deep vacuum just now. Well, as deep as I could manage anyway. So the way I do that is I just open up the high side, close down the low side, and as the compressor warms up, it helps to drive any moisture out of the compressor, as well as the evaporator as well. The only issue is with my sensing bulb, I haven't got any thermal compound with me to attach it properly, so we're probably going to have a bit of an issue there. It's going to let more refrigerant through than it should because there's not a good enough thermal contact there. But what I might do is just soak it with some water, and that'll be better than nothing. So I'm going to connect a hose up to it, run some water through it slowly, and then see how well it performs. So there's a very slow trickle of water running through it. I'm going to close off the high side now. It's already pressurised with a little bit of refrigerant. Open up the low side. The vacuum pump, I just usually just leave that running with its inlet closed, just so it could discharge any moisture out of it, but I'll switch it off just now. Right, so we'll just do the usual safety precautions such as opening all the doors. Okay, so let's see what the pressures do with themselves. That's just letting the gas in now. Now, this system does take quite a lot. Just have to wait until we get some life in the sight glass. So, a good thing to do periodically is shake your refrigerant container, because it does start to get quite cold and it just gets a bit more pressure in it. I've got some liquid in the sight glass, so I want the sight glass to be full, so I'm just letting in gas just now. So the inlet to the evaporator is beginning to get nice and cold now. Still not yet got a full sight glass. That's mainly because the pressure in this container is beginning to get pretty low, so we're struggling to actually get the gas in, so it could take a little while to get the system filled properly. Yeah, the evaporator's not been fully utilised yet. Okay, so that was our problem. The water flow had stopped completely because I'm just feeding it from one of these sort of dodgy valves. I've turned it up a bit. Now it's working really nicely. Nice cold air coming out. Pretty cold back to the compressor as well, actually. Sight glass is now full, so yeah, it helps if you've actually got somewhere for the heat to go when you're filling a refrigeration system. Otherwise you're not going to be able to fill it properly and you'll probably destroy the compressor. And the compressor's actually cooled down a bit as well now, so not much in the way of condensation to see, sadly. Must not be very humid today, but it certainly is getting pretty cold. I might need to play around with the superheat setting a bit, simply because of just how I've changed it all. So maybe if I took the low side pressure down a bit, I might actually help. So yeah, what I'll do is post another update video about this once I've sort of found some nice thermal compound for that bulb, and then we'll see how it goes. So hopefully after I do that and then play about with the superheat setting, I should end up with a system which works really well.